Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. We talking about church hurt today. We gonna get deep down into it about the uh the harm that the church has caused to so many. And I'm gonna share a little bit about my church hurt experience as well. So again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of a Quick Little Word podcast. It's your boy Chris Wright. So to get straight into it, first of all, I want to talk about there was a creator on TikTok, I believe, that basically said that church hurt wasn't real, and a lot of people were really upset, rightfully so, offended, rightfully so. And they did what they do on TikTok. They pretty much dragged this individual, but um the individual was in my opinion very kind and really thoughtful because they came back and apologized for saying it. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people got caught up in you know the fact that it obviously was said, you know, and sometimes things sound good in our head because it may not apply to us. We think it's almost like we invalidate other people's experiences and feelings behind it. But church hurt is a very real thing. People have been hurt by, you know, the people in a church, just the way they've handled things, the way they may have handled other people, just the leadership as a whole, the way the entire church is ran, the foundation of the church, um, the lack that the church have when it's not adjusting accordingly to the times, you know, and speaking from experience, when I saw that vision video originally, and I was like, nah, church hurt is a real thing because just I remember years ago, the church I belonged to, you know, at the time, I really felt like, there was a calling and I wanted to go into ministry. And in order to do so, even with just applying to school, as far as ministry school, you have to go to the church and go to the pastor and all of that stuff. And you got to get them to sign documentation and paperwork. And I remember when I did everything I was supposed to do. Went through all the proper channels. I called, set up the meeting. And the day of the meeting that I had with the pastor, I got to the church and it's pouring down rain in this day, and he's not there. And I remember the secretary like, "Oh, are you sure you have an appointment?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have an appointment." So she proceeds to call. He doesn't answer. She calls again. He doesn't answer. Finally, he picks up, and she's like, "Oh, he'll be in shortly or whatever." It's like I feel like it wasn't that important to meet with me that day. Nonetheless, he finally gets there, and he's literally rubbing like coal out of his eyes. You hear me? Like he's wiping his eyes and stuff like he had just woke up. Like I interrupted his nap. And as we got to talking about ministry and me getting into it, and I wanted to preach the gospel. It was really like he just wasn't interested. Like he wasn't interested in the conversation. I felt like he felt like his time was being wasted. And he's just like, oh yeah, well, we just gonna throw you in the in the pulpit and see what you got. Like, no, really, no, there was no meat and potatoes of the conversation, no encouragement or anything like that. It was really like, hey, you wasting my time. And that I felt some type of way. You hear me? And some may say, like, oh, well, you just personalized it. Well, what else am I supposed to do when, first of all, I called a week or so in advance just to get to the meeting and like you not even there. You know what I'm saying? So like when people say that church hurt, or when that video went viral and said church hurt wasn't real, like I immediately thought about that situation that I had. I immediately thought about the situations of people that I know that have had horrible, horrible situations with with their uh with their churches. And we're talking abuse, we're talking and we're talking sexual, physical, mental abuse. You know what I'm saying? So to say church hurt isn't real is crazy, because there are people that go to church and in scripture and in the word, says one thing, but the church is a contradiction sometimes. They like to say come as you are, but a person come as they are and then proceeds to get dragged by the elders in the church, the sidebar conversations, the gossip and stuff like that. It's not welcoming. It's, you do what we say, uh don't come back and things like that. It's really distasteful when you think about it, because if this is supposed to be a place of acceptance, then why am I not, or why aren't people accepted for who they are and where they are at that current time? It's like they want you to come to church for healing and all of this stuff, but yet they don't want a lot of sick people in. The church, I feel like, has lost its way, and I feel like that happened a long time ago, to be quite honest. You know what I'm saying? When you think about some of these pastors in these mega churches, like a lot of it, in my opinion, is just a big circus. It's a concert. The theatricals are bigger than the word. And I'm not saying, and let me be clear, I'm not saying that pastors can't, enjoy the fruits of their labor. However, you got pastors wearing $2,000 shirts while they preaching the sermon. Like, make it make sense. It's a circus. You got pastors spitting on people to get a point across. Like, that's crazy to me. You have pastors and deacons and leaders of the church basically turning people around and kicking people out because they don't disclose their finances. They don't tithe the way that the church sees fit. You know what I'm saying? Like, make that make sense. Just because I don't give, that 10%, some people don't have the 10% to give. Some people just wanted to come to church to get a word. Even if a person is given something, it may not be quite 10, but they're giving something. And as a church, you basically saying like that's not enough. That's crazy to me. I remember some time ago, it's been a few years now, but an elderly lady who had been a part of this church for, I want to say, at least 40 plus years, basically received a letter and got kicked out of the church because they felt like she wasn't tithing enough. She wasn't giving enough. And and you say church hurt isn't real. Like, lady go to the church because her spouse is cheating, spouse is abusive, and the leaders of the church say go to therapy. You go to therapy, nothing changes. And a person comes back to you and say, hey, nothing's changed. And instead of you instead of the church guiding this person to the proper channels and assisting with a safe divorce proceeding, it's all, the Lord told me to that you should work it out with your husband. Like, don't lie on the Lord like that. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of that going on too when these preachers and stuff get in these pulpits and they're like, "Oh, the Lord told me to tell you." Like, did the Lord really tell you that? Is that just how you feel at the moment, and that's a word that you have? You hear me? Like let's process that for a minute. Somebody comes to the church and say, "Hey, I need X, Y, and Z for I'm short on my light bill." And don't get me wrong, I've seen churches that assist people and things like that. But how dare the church who wants you to tithe and you to offer to pay for things, to fix up the church and to pay salaries and all of that. But when you have to come to them and be like, "Hey, I'm short on this bill and my kid has fees," and you have to go through this whole process to get it. If I'm giving 10% every Sunday and my yearly offering, just hypothetically, is over 10 grand, then I should be able to come to the church and say, "Hey, my car has broken down. It's gonna cost $2,000 to fix it." It should be able to get that 2 grand with no problem because that car is my source to get to work, to continue to pay my bills, to feed myself, to get to the church. The church has caused so much hurt and so much pain that it is unexcusable. A lot of it has to do with not wanting to let go of tradition. A lot of it has to do with false prophets. A lot of it has to do with the lack of leadership and just people being mean and mean spirited. Let's call a spade a spade. You have people in the church that are just nasty people. Gossip, they full of drama, they talk about you behind your back, and they talking about you and gossiping in the church. Like make that make sense. But church hurt ain't real though. You have to it's almost like you have to choose either going to church and probably having to deal with the drama that come with church or not going and then feeling bad about not going. And that's the sole reason I feel like a lot of people today are focusing more on relationship instead of religion. They're focusing on having that intimate relationship with God versus saying I'm going to church because a lot of people have been hurt by the church. Like, you know, some of these pastors, just for an example, I remember years ago, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a big pastor. And I remember it was a jet. He was trying to get the congregation to basically buy him a new jet. And these folks were like literally giving it last. Like you got people catching a bus to service and you saying give you $300 so you can go purchase a new jet. And that was and you already had one though. You already had a jet. But you wanted the congregation to flip your bill to purchase you a jet. For what? So you could look a certain way, huh? It's no way, in my humble opinion, that the pastor should be rich and the congregation should be poor. That makes no sense. It makes no sense to have a congregation that is struggling to pay bills week in and week out, and the pastor is living lavish, staying in, multi-million dollar homes, driving hundreds of thousands of dollars of cars, and wearing all of this expensive clothing and stuff like that. And your congregation, and some of your congregation can't put food on the table Make that make sense. If the church is receiving all of these tax breaks and all of this money from people tithing and offering, why aren't why isn't the church taking care of the community as it should? Why isn't the church holding, other than like, because the only time certain things come around is during the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, where they do the food. You bring something to the church and they distribute it out to the families in need. Why isn't that a year round thing? Why doesn't every church have a food pantry? Like, especially the bigger churches, why don't they have where the congregation can go with no questions asked and get items that they may need, household items that they may need, whether it's uh, a box of macaroni and cheese or a roll of toilet paper. The congregation should not be struggling to make ends meet while the pastor is living a lavish lifestyle. And look, I know some churches are bigger than others. I'm not talking about the little small corner churches, you know, with a congregation of like 25 people. I'm talking about your 100, 300 plus churches that have all of this money. The pastor's driving Ferraris and Bentleys. Like, the pastor, what's his name? Bishop Whitehead, I believe, recently just got like 9 years for like fraud, allegedly. Like, you out here committing fraud, but you have the audacity to go stand in the pulpit and try to preach the gospel and put on this show and everything like that. Like, that's crazy to me. And he's not the only one. He just the one that got caught. I remember years ago, this dude I was working with told me. He said, I hate to say it. He was like, but becoming a pastor is a lucrative job. He was like, is easy money, because he was looking at it from the standpoint and understanding that, like, man, look, all I got to do is show up, preach a couple times out the week, and I can rack in all of this money. Because a lot of pastors and preachers aren't doing it because it's in their heart. They're doing it for the monetary gain, for the money of it. And again, I get it. If that is some of them's full time job, then by all means, they should be paid accordingly. But we talking tens of millions of dollars. Joel Osteen wouldn't open his church to hurricane victims so they can have a dry place to go. Like, that's crazy. You know, pastors committing fraud, getting charged. And what's crazy is he'll get out and do the exact same thing, and people will open their arms and forgive him, and just like pretend like it never happened and start giving them money again. You got people in a church who know that someone that one of their members in a church abused, whether it be sexually, mentally, or physically abused someone else in a congregation. And the solution is to sweep it under the rug. We don't speak about it. And oh, we should just forgive them. But that other person, who that victim, has to deal with that. They have to go into the church every Sunday knowing that the church didn't have their back when they reached out for help and say, this person is abusing me. The church's response was, oh, you need to forgive them. They didn't kick him out of the church or anything. Make it make sense. So you can't say church hurt isn't real, because a lot of people have been hurt by the church more than one time, and they didn't give up on the church until they finally couldn't take it anymore. Some people are currently being hurt by the church. People have stories And you can't tell me everybody just making it up. Church hurt is a real thing, man. Like we can't invalidate people's experiences in their situations because we didn't experience it. Some people have had, I guess some great experiences with the church. But that doesn't mean other people experience has been the same. When you think about, like some of the deacons and stuff getting caught up having affairs in the church. Your wife sitting on the front row, but you having an affair with Sister Louise on the ninth row. And but church hurt ain't real. People had to sit and watch, the people that they look up to within the church basically cause damage. And the favorite thing to do is, oh, they just gonna get up there Sunday morning, they gonna apologize, and like we just gonna forget and move on like it never happened. The problem with that is a lot of times it's not their first time, their second time. A lot of times they are repeat offenders when it comes to some of the things that they do. So let's not invalidate people's experience and feelings when it comes to church. Church hurt is a real thing. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of A Quick Little Word podcast. Be sure to share this, like, comment, subscribe. Um, Check the descriptions, get you some merch, you hear me? Facians.com. Check out your boy, lock in, tune in with me. Look forward to hollering at y'all again. So until next time, peace, love, and happiness.